would be hard to beat Hans Rosling, but I'll give it a shot. I like to think that the discipline of product design is an ancient one. Human beings have been designing tools for tens of thousands of years. Now, I'll argue today that the prehistoric approach to design was perhaps more evolved than our efforts at present because function was more important than profit. Now, let's briefly think like a caveman. In between foraging for firewood and procreating, our caveman tripped over a piece of flintstone and perhaps cut his foot. A light bulb went on somewhere. If the stone can cut my foot, it can probably also cut my steak. Now, the caveman picked up the stone and had a good look at it and consulted his design team. After many iterations and probably even more bleeding fingertips, he mastered smashing rocks into one another to create a perfectly sharp edge. His design spread around the world and was copied in China, and that was that. But fortunately, he didn't just design this thing. He used it, he manufactured it, he might have shared it, and then he just threw it away again. So the stone came from the ground, and after being used, it was put straight back into the ground. When his tool was no longer useful to our caveman, he left it to return to nature, and maybe some other caveman cut his foot on it. Over its natural life cycle as a product, the only process the stone underwent was the physical change of its shape. Just like our caveman's work, nearly 100% of our today's designs end up being thrown away and end up somewhere. But instead of beautifully blending back into nature, like the stone did, today's products end up everywhere around us. As we are increasingly aware that we live on a very small planet, there's no such thing as throwing something away. There simply is no away. Eventually, our waste ends up in our water supply, in our oceans, our air, our soil, and eventually in our neighbor's backyard. So we have to rethink the way we manufacture products and how these products can be updated, kind of like a service. When the caveman's stone tool was no good, what did he do? He took another stone, smashed it up, and from a bigger but less useful tool, he might have made a smaller but new and sharp knife. And the chips, the cutoffs, could be used as arrowheads or any other smaller knife. So out of one single less useful product, he may have ended up with several new, very useful products. He upcycled his product before this was even a buzzword. So is there any way we can inspire from this process and somehow apply it to today's complex design projects? Looking at this disassembled camera, we really don't know what to do with it. There's no real use for us, well, unless you're a real nerd. Most products are only designed for assembly and not for disassembly and disposal. Products need to be designed and manufactured for a better safe mass disposal and ideally for recycling. Better yet, we need to design and manufacture products that last longer, ideally age beautifully, and can be updated with technological innovation. Kind of, think of a cell phone, for example. In the end, we don't just design for ourselves, but we design for the interaction with the space that surrounds us, or the environment. So this includes also protecting what we designed for in the first place. Because we have the ability to design technical genius monstrosities, doesn't really mean that we have to. So good design doesn't have to be complex. Objects using good materials that are well made age beautifully, and often surpass several life cycles of badly made or synthetic products. I'm really just generalizing, but just think of what ages better, a leather satchel or a plastic bag. The end of a product life cycle is, I think, a very important part of design innovation when the product's life exceeds its function. So my job as designer is to design things that age beautifully and last for their purpose. And that purpose can be very long or very short. So once that purpose has been fulfilled, the product should be able to be upcycled or at least recycled. Now, can we make the disposal of a product as much fun as buying it in the first place or getting it as a gift? I think we can. And I think it's all about designing the environment around that product. Can governments and corporations, for example, introduce incentives for consumers' proactive involvement? I'm sure it's possible, but I think it would also add somewhat of a consumer loyalty to the product, right? And can we as designers better engage consumers in our global zero-waste dreams? Yes, we can. And by choosing the right processes, materials, and ideally the product usages. Now, if you know that we will only use a product for a limited time and every product has a limited time, let's actively start thinking about what will happen to it once it leaves our life. The consumer needs to be aware that the purchase of a product carries with it the responsibility of its ethical and safe disposal. Now, there's many questions as designers you get from people, and there's often not a direct answer. And when I'm really stuck with something, I often just go back and answer the question with another question, and this would be, what would nature do? And this usually gives me a pretty decent way and a direction. Thank you.